Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? Oh, really great to see all of you. My name is Bright Richards, and I'm the founder of New Dutch Connections. And I fled Liberia many years ago, came to the Netherlands, and I'll just take you a little bit through my journey and through what I'm doing, through my job in trying to bring people together, and especially also in helping refugees who come to the Netherlands to be seen differently and to get the right connection, the right place, so that they can be seen by the right people. Because if refugees want to make a new start in a new country, they need to be seen by the right people who sees their talent, who sees their quality, and who see what they can mean to society. And that's one of the things that I'm doing. That's what I do almost every day. But I work a lot with, I've been working a lot with refugees for a long time. Those who are undocumented, those who are in procedure, and as well those who have a resident permit. So, and as an artist, the theme of identity is something that keeps me busy, because I noticed that when you flee your own country and you come into a new country, you get what I call a judicial identity. So all of a sudden you have these labels. You are either someone in procedure, or you are someone who have a resident permit, or you are someone who is undocumented. And all these labels says nothing about who you are. And I think the challenges we have as artists is how do we make sure people are seen as who they are, and that people are connected with how they love to be connected with. And so that's what I do. So you would see me, I work a lot, and so one of the challenges I'm facing right now is how do I do that a lot with artists. I do it a lot with people from all walks of life, so most times I'm in different companies, bringing refugees into companies. I'll show you a lot of films, making sure that different companies who have challenges on the area of corporate social responsibility, diversity and inclusion, use our method as both as a social organization, as an art organization, to make sure that the onboarding process is good, to make sure that there's enough. So I use it for advocacy, to make sure that the company is open to receive others to be part of the organization. So I see it works easily when you are dealing with technical companies, IT companies, building companies, but the greatest challenge is how do you do this with the art sector? And sometimes it's quite weird, because the art sector is supposed to be open and supposed to be welcoming, but sometimes I discover it is easier for me to work with very commercial companies, because they are very, very honest to say, Bright, we want to do something, but we don't know how. And so that gives me a lot of opportunity to come in as an artist, to do whatever I want to do, because they are very, very honest in saying, we want to do more on diversity, we want to do more on inclusion, we want to give more refugees position in our organizations, but we don't know how. And I don't get such a request easily from art organizations. So, so that's the difference, and that's the challenges. But okay, I want to take you through the way I work, because I work a lot in refugee centers, and I work a lot with refugees coming into the country. So the first thing I do when I have a meeting like this is by doing the following. We start by doing a couple of rituals, and I want to take you through the rituals that we do, the storytellings that we do. Maybe that would inspire you in what you're doing as well. So when we come together like a morning like this, when everybody's exhausted, like I performed yesterday in Nijmegen, and so you're going from one to the other, we do a couple of things. And you know, when you work in refugee centers, people normally don't have something to wake up for in the morning, because every day is the same when you're in a refugee center. So sometimes people say, I want to wake up in the morning, but I don't know what for. I don't have a job to go to, I don't have a school to go to, I have nothing to do the whole day. So factually, the rhythm of many people in a refugee center changes. Night becomes day, day becomes night. And so it's sometimes a bit similar if you've worked in prisons before. You know, people don't, when you come into prisons, when you're used to working in prison, I've worked in prisons for some time as well. You see people, whether it is winter, summer, they are all wearing shorts and slippers, and they'll be asking you, how is the weather outside? So it's something similar in refugee centers, because people have nothing to wake up for in the day. If you're in a refugee center in a place like Amsterdam, you're very lucky. A place like Utrecht, you're very lucky because a lot of activities, a lot of organizations. But if you're in the remote places in Holland, like I work in remote places as well, like Oude Pekela, which is one of the poorest villages in Holland in the north. So then there are other challenges, because the people are also facing their own challenges and they just feel, okay, why are these refugees also here? So when you work in all those places, there are not so much initiative coming there. There are not so much artists coming there to say, okay, we want to make a difference in these places. So when we come together and we are able to mobilize all the refugees to come together for us to do something, we start by doing the following rituals, which I want to do with you guys this morning. In Africa, we do say, in order to survive in a new country, you have to forget and remember. But what do you need to forget? And what do you need always to remember? My mother often tells me, she would say, Bright, our loved ones who have gone into the world of the ancestors, they are not really dead, but they are alive. They are alive to stand next to us during our journey through earth. My mother, who during the civil war in Liberia was separated from me, fell one afternoon asleep and she was dreaming. In her dream, she saw the spirit of death gradually approaching her house. And she thought, which of her children is this spirit coming to carry? She saw me naked. The AK-47 aimed at my breast. And out and sweating, she woke up and she screamed to the gods of her forefathers to stand next to me. The next morning, I left the place that I was hiding because at that moment, the war have reached my doorstep, so I had to flee my house, and I was living in a refugee camp opposite the American embassy. And so I left this place that I was hiding, and I went to search for food, because in the whole country there was nothing more than grass to eat, and people were dying from hunger, from dehydration, from executions. But I had a girlfriend of mine, and I know that she would have food. I knew that because a few days ago, I went to her place, and she gave me something to eat for me and my family. So I thought she would have something for me to eat. So she was happy to see me, and she embraces me, she kisses me, we talked a bit, and she gave me 3 donuts. Happily, I took the donuts and I was going back to this refugee camp where I was living with my family. And then a friend suddenly came around the corner and he was holding an AK-47 in his hands. And he screamed, he said, "Stop! I'm going to kill you." So he said to me, "Put off your clothes." I put off my clothes. He aimed the AK-47 to me. But he also said, "I want you to stand as far as possible from me." He would say, "Go and stand 6 feet," which means stand as far as possible from me. But there are different stories that goes around during the war. And one of the stories was that if you stand very far, it's easy for you to be shot. But if you stand very close, most of the soldiers are afraid to shoot you because they then think that when they shoot you and your blood touches them, that they might lose what they call their magical powers. And so he was pushing me away. He wanted me to stand very far from him, and I was coming close to him. And I don't know how long it took, because the time seems to disappear when you stand before death. And then you seems to, in my case, I saw myself dead, I saw myself dead on the street, and I saw the other dead people around me, because that's very normal when you're in a warring situation. I saw all the other dead people around me, and I knew that if I die here on the street, that it's going to be impossible for my family to see me, for my mother to see me. And I know that my mother was really going to be very, very bereaved, that she was going to get depressed, that she's going to have a lot of pain. And I thought, I don't want this to happen to her. Maybe I wasn't really afraid for myself dying, but I was really afraid of the impact it's going to have on my mother. And so I didn't want her to die on the street. So somehow that gave me a lot of energy. And sometimes when I had once a colleague here in Holland, he was working with me, and at a certain moment he was in depression, and he would tell me, Bright, I have no water anymore. There's nothing for me to live for. And I say, but is there nothing? Is there nothing at all? Do you have kids? Do you have a wife? Is there nothing at all that would really drive you to want to leave? And he said, no, nobody finds me interesting. Nobody finds me of value. And I would have this discussion with him, but somehow I didn't succeed. One day I got a telephone from his wife, and he said he jumped from the flat and he was dead. But in my case, I told him as well this story. I said, for me, this was the only reason I wanted to leave then. I didn't have kids, but I just knew that my mother loves me so much, she wants me to leave. And so, well, I was still with this guy, and he would push me away, and I would come close to him, and I don't know how long it is. But all of a sudden, somebody came around. And the person who came around, I never saw this person before. Never. And so this person started asking, hey, what is going on? And so I started begging. I said, listen, I'm just an actor. I make television. That's what I do. I don't have anything to do with the war. I produce television. I act in TV. I do theater, and that's all what I do. And he wants to kill me, and I have nothing. I've done nothing to him. I don't even know why. So I was really I was trying. I knew I could not convince this guy. He was bent on killing me, and I can't stop him. But I was really begging this other guy to please intervene. And he kept listening to me, and he did something. And he asked this guy with his gun, he said, please, can you let him leave? Please. But there was also something. He said he knew me. And so he pleaded for me. And then this guy said, okay, Bright, go. He let me go, and I left. I came back to my hiding place. And that was the moment my family decided, Bright, it is important for you to leave this country today. So my sister made some arrangement with a few UN soldiers, because I never wanted to leave Liberia. I had my own television program. I had my own theater group. And I was doing well. And I knew how to survive. But at that moment, and I knew it was a war, but you get used to war. It's something you get used to. The first time you think is, oh, horrible, but after that you get used to it. You know how to survive. You're living every day with it. You get used to all the dead bodies, get used to the shooting, you get used to escaping, you get used to all the bombing. It becomes a part of your life. The only thing for me is I couldn't work anymore as an artist, because I couldn't do anything anymore. But still, a lot of people knew me as an artist, so that was helping me to survive. Because I was an artist, I could survive. But at that moment, I knew my artist status could not save me anymore. I could have been dead. And that was when my family really decided, you need to leave this country. And every arrangement was made, and I left. And then, before the war came, I was a popular person in Liberia. I was one of the first generations producing local television programs. So when I go on the street, people will run behind me. So, and then all of a sudden I was in Holland. I was here in Europe fighting for a resident permit, fighting for every kind of thing, and nobody knew me. So I was nobody. And as an artist, you need your audience. You know your audience know you. That's where you get your energy from. And here all of a sudden, I was not even an artist. I was just somebody struggling to get to have an opportunity to live in the country. And I didn't even know where to start. Where do you start? We have a saying in Africa that the people that you meet in a new country determines your future. I was living in a house with a few guys later, and two of the guys I was living together with, we all came from the same situation. They got some offers from people selling drugs or other things, and they went the other way. But, okay, in the refugee center I was living in, I was organizing entertainment programs. And there was a woman called Grace Rose. She was working for the MOA. She saw me organizing this program. Even at that time, later I heard that actually what I was doing was not allowed, but I was just doing it knowing whether it was allowed or not. And Grace Rose saw me organizing this program, and she said, Bright, I see you're searching for contact with other artists. And she said, well, besides the fact that I work here at this refugee center as a nurse, I'm a volunteer at music meeting, and I want to introduce you to the people over there. Maybe you can also work there as a volunteer. Okay, what do I have to lose? So she introduced me at music meeting, and the first year I was working at the door, just having, I'm not a musician, I'm an actor, but okay, I was working at the door, and then I had a discussion with the director of the festival. And the director said, what is your experience in show business? And I said, okay, I have a few experience, because in the African culture, we say, don't exaggerate what you can do. Just always put yourself a little bit lower so that when you get the opportunity, you can really show what you can. So I said that, I know a little bit. He said, okay, we'll get in contact. I never heard from him anymore. But Gray called him, and Gray said to him, I know Bright. And this is the second time somebody who says they know me was taking an action for me in the situation that I was where I couldn't help myself. And so Gray said, I know Bright. And so I was given the opportunity to present music meeting. Then I didn't know it was the biggest world music festival in Europe, in Holland. So when I was in Liberia, I had my own identity. I knew who I was as an artist. I know my position. I know what I do. I need to always try to find a way to deal with the censorship, but I can find my way as an artist. I know, like some Dutch people say, I know the limitations of my Kremlin. That's what a lot of Dutch people say. So I knew the limitation of my own Kremlin. But all of a sudden, okay, here I didn't know. So I went, in my case, I went to the shop, and I bought for myself a wooden shoe. So I bought for myself a wooden shoe, and I had it with my African clothes, not made in this form. So I thought, okay, this is then my Dutch artistic identity. So, and I so much, so the moment I wore the wooden shoes and I was presenting the festival, and I would say things like in Dutch, nobody understood it. I would say, hooggehuurd publiek, which is the public that was hired. And so people don't really understand me, but it didn't matter so much, because what happened was that when I wore my wooden shoes, stood on that stage, I got an energy in my body again. And that was the kind of energy that I lost by becoming a refugee, by fleeing. I lost the self-confidence in myself. But when I wore the wooden shoes, it was like I got the energy back that I had when I was 12 years old, and I started acting. So I got the same energy back, and the energy gave me the self-confidence that I needed to do audition for the film school, to do the audition for the theater school, and the rest is history. But it all started with Gray, who said, I would introduce you to somebody. If she has done nothing, maybe I would say I've gotten there, but it would have taken much longer. But she only decided, she's not even in the art sector, she's just a volunteer, she's not a policy maker, she has no single power, but she just decided to say, I see you, and I see this is your need, and I would just this is all what I can do is just introduce you. So sometimes when I speak to Gray now, she will say, but Bright, I just introduced you to walk at the door. I didn't know you were going to be on stage and going to be everywhere afterwards in Holland, but it doesn't matter. We all need somebody who is willing to take that first step to bring us somewhere. And that's what I do now. I just use the stage that I have. I try to offer that stage to other refugees with talents. And right now I'm touring through the country now with a show called Future Citizens, where I allow refugees to meet the right people. So my job is not only preparing refugees to come on stage, but also making sure that they have the right people are in the hall who would see their talent and give them the opportunity to do what they love to do best.
Let's hear it for Bright. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bright.
Hello, everybody. How you doing? It's early, eh? You had some coffee? No? First and all, thank you, Brakke Grond, for having us. It's very nice to be here and see other organizations working on topics that we all been working on. It gives you the feeling that you're not the only one trying to fix these problems that are very, very known in our communities, in our job. Super interesting and also inspiring to hear you, Bright. I used to live in Holland as an asylum seeker, so I can understand what you mean. Today we're going to tell a little bit about what we do in Antwerp, in Belgium and in Brussels. So I think we're going to start with Global Aroma and then we will take over from there.
Yeah, and maybe I wanted to say, listening to Bright, and also knowing that there are many other places from Paris, Germany, Berlin, Antwerp, Brussels, Ghent, you will notice throughout the day that each organization is completely different. So it's not because you work with a community that on the first view might be the same for you, but it's every organization works different. So we use a different discourse, different language, different lexicon. So also please bear with us and look for all these differences and similarities that might inspire. And also it's good for us to listen to others, to be pushed and be continuously reflective, self-reflective on what you do. Voilà. So yeah, we are going to guide you a bit through our organizations. So first Global Aroma from Brussels, Fameus from Antwerp, and then we are collaborating already a bit. So we are also going to speak about that and our relation with institutions. So yes, Global Aroma, like we've been already introduced. It's an artistic meeting and working space based in Brussels, and we're actually working with a community for people with precarious citizenship statuses. That is very broadly said. Actually, the group of people we work with are people with within a asylum procedure, or are known refugees, or are stateless, or have all different kind of statuses. But the most important thing is that we don't necessarily ask people questions about their statuses. We meet because people have an artistic practice or are interested to develop a practice as art worker or are interested in discovering the arts field. So that's actually the main reason why we meet. And so there is often asked, how do we meet people? So yeah, Amina is the community octopus. She goes often to, and all of us go often to arrival centers, Brussels-based, but also surrounding Brussels-based, because all Belgium has, of course, a lot of asylum centers, but it's not always that easy for people living maybe at the border to come to Brussels, also to organize transport all the time. So it's also a complex element to take into account. And we really have a whole hospitality strategy or methodology. We go first to the space of the asylum center. We go and explain what we do. We bring, so our next step is to organize something in Global Aroma, so people come in a next step to Global Aroma, and then really tailor-made, we try to see for each person, like, what do you want to develop? Is it more your practice, art practice? You want to discover the arts field as a visitor, so it's really a tailor-made support. Voila, so we work actually for 3 different groups. We work for artists, art enthusiasts, and female makers. These are 3, let's say, communities that form together one big community that is not a vast or fixed community. Because often art institutions ask us, hey, can you spread this in your community? But then we always ask this question, but who do you mean actually? Because this community is so diverse and so, I mean, there is not one community, and the community changes also all the time. Voila, but artists we support mainly in our artistic workspace, which is an atelier, a workshop, and a rehearsal space where artists can come and develop their practices. Mainly we support visual artists, audiovisual artists, and musicians. Not so much performers or performing artists, a few. And so what we offer is mainly infrastructure, so people don't necessarily don't need to pay for anything. Also all the tools that people need for their practice, and the network. And that's probably the thing where we will speak about the most. So for each artist in Atelier, and for now there are around, it's always changing, with 20-ish. We check with each artist individually, okay, what is the next step? How much time do you, would you like to use Aroma? Like for now we have a group of artists staying until the end of December. And then for each artist we see, okay, what kind of exposition spaces do you want to work with, or workspaces or residency spaces. So it's really tailor-made to see like where are you in your trajectory and what other partner could help you or support you in the next phase. So yeah, we offer all the tools. The people are making canvases. So then the second pillar, so the first pillar is really where we support artists, people with a practice. And the second pillar we work with is art enthusiasts. We support via the program Art for All, which Amina is coordinating. And actually, it means that we try to create a subjective map of the city. So every month we go to 5, 10-ish activities throughout all the arts field. It can be from an exposition in Beaux-Arts to a concert in Ancien Belgique, but it can also be like a very underground party somewhere in a hidden spot. And the program in itself is made via a programmation group. It's like a whole trajectory. So there is like, yeah, this is a bit of a symbol. So yeah, there is a programmation group. It's a group of people based from the community, and they look like what is actually this month in the arts field in Brussels, Flanders, on the program, and then they make like a complementary program, let's say. Like it's important for people who don't necessarily speak all the languages, that it's also language no problem, or that there is music and also at the other hand performance or an exposition. And we always look for the contextualization of the work, because it's not per se that everybody is like already or yet an experienced art visitor, or I would say. But yeah, it's a whole trajectory of bringing people together, going together to a performance, having afterwards a conversation about it, meeting with the artist, and it's all for free. We organize everything, so people don't need to think about thresholds that might not connect them with the arts field. So yeah, this is the programmation group, kind of, or yeah, people are making a subjective mapping. That's actually it. We're making like kind of research on what kind of impact does it have on discovering a city via arts institutions that we visit, and also what differences between all these different arts institutions we visit, because some arts institutions know very well how to host a group of people, others are more on the search, and we are like trying to map this so we can also use it as a tool towards our institutions, this word. Voila, and then the third pillar is actually called Espace Femme, because we, the space actually is very much, or was very much used by men it was easier for men to come to Globe Aroma than it was for women. So we decided actually to open it up on every Thursday, women only. So women only Thursdays on Espace Femme. And the women that come to Globe Aroma on Thursdays are not necessarily artists, not necessarily art enthusiasts, not necessarily female makers. It's actually a very hybrid group of people just coming together and using the arts as a tool to communicate and with each other, and also to create a network. And they actually use our infrastructure as a main starting point to create a dialogue. For instance, how and where do we feel comfortable within the infrastructure, and what kind of infrastructural changes do we need to do to make this comfortable feeling grow? So they made like a mural at the beginning of our workspace, so that the female presence is already there from the beginning you enter Globe Aroma. Or they created like mobile walls that you can make like a hiding corner. And then maybe to say, like, infrastructure is actually super important for us. All the pillars are very much based on how does our infrastructure function, what means infrastructure towards hospitality. We call the first 3 spaces, spaces in our infrastructure, the hospitality zone, because that's really a space where people need to land, breathe, and from there we try to communicate with people and see like what kind of trajectory, tailor-made trajectory, can support you. And for the moment we are, let's say, creating a cross-sectoral infrastructure. So this is our building. At the back we have our atelier spaces, and the front building will be in the future a space where people can have like transit housing, and we are collaborating with all different kind of sectors in a little space seat in Brussels, where there is like legal aid, social, juridical support, psychological support. We are from the arts, and then there is also a language school, and there will be social housing. And we all support the same community, like people who have, due to their citizenship, less access to several actors within society. So that's what we do. Maybe because Ramos will speak about Fameus, which is really connected to Antwerp. You're starting from within Antwerp, making connections to all different kind of players within Antwerp, and we operate from Brussels and Flanders. So Globe Aroma is subventioned by the Kunstendecreet, Vlaams Kunstendecreet. And so, which means that we have like a huge network within Brussels, Flanders, but also internationally. And Amina made like this a beautiful cosmos of globe, and you see like yellow is internationally, the purple is arts partners, the green is education partners, the red-ish is migrational partners, and the blue is all socio-cultural, socio-economical partners. So we really operate within an intersection of several sectors to really support a specific community. I think that's it.
Dus, again, sorry for my bad English. Sometime I will look for words in Dutch. So my name is David, but everybody calls me Ramos as my artistic name, and I've been working for Fameus now almost 2 years. Fameus is an organization that works with people that are interested in arts, and we have seen that in those people there is not only Belgian people but all kinds of people that are also in Belgium. And what we do actually with Fameus is that we don't only give residencies to people, but we also have funds. We have a place that people can rent. We have advice that we formulate by working with other organizations in the cultural sector of Antwerp, of Belgium. We come together to question how organizations work with newcomers and what challenge do we have to maybe extra take care of it. And also we try to connect actually organization and newcomers together in Fameus. we have seen that during the 10 years that Fameus exists, that there is a big question in community building in Antwerp, and we saw that with newcomers, one of the big things that we go through as newcomers is our lack of access to buildings, access to knowledge, access to infrastructure, and access to network. So 2 years ago, we decided to start a Stads Canvas in Antwerp. You can go to, yeah, thank you, well. Stads Canvas in Antwerp. Why did this come true? Because we've seen that in our network, we have a lot of people from different stages in their life, and we see that as organization, we are too dependable of how big organizations work. We are dependent on who funds us. We are dependent on a stage. Where can we find stage? With Stads Canvas is a way for us to connect newcomers with the city and with organizations, but also a way for us, like Brian said, to show our other face, not only the number you are an asylum seeker or you are somebody in crisis. No, what are the other aspects that we, from people from other diasporas, bring into the country? And because we saw, like, I'm gonna say Bright a lot of times, like you said, it's difficult to work with arts organizations sometimes. Because of price, but also because of they have this status, the big house in Antwerp. So we decided instead of working and waiting for them, maybe it's better to use the city as your stage, use the city as your canvas where you paint the color of different diasporas in music, dance, exposition. You work with them to introduce newcomers to the city and introduce the city to the newcomers. You may maybe ask, how do we get to the participants? Like we said in the beginning, we work with Atlas. Atlas is the center of immigration in Antwerp. And via Atlas, we get a lot of subscriptions, but also from other partners with who we work with in Antwerp. We get a lot of inscriptions for them. So, for example, if I was somebody that just got to Antwerp and I'm looking for a dance school, and I go to Atlas and I say, okay, I want to learn the language, but I want to do something with art. Via Atlas, they send us a link with your name, and we, at Fameus, we're gonna contact you and make an appointment with you. What is very important in Fameus, but also by Stads Canvas, is that we always departure from the needs from the participants. So there's never a case that we start a project because Fameus wants to do it. It's always what people want, what people need, and we try to avoid from the term we help people, because we're not Jesus. We facilitate. That's more our goal in our working with newcomers. And one of the most important things that we've found that people really appreciate is the humanity, that when somebody comes in, that you don't judge people, but just offer something to drink. Hey, how you doing? How was your day? Bring first the humanity in your work, and the rest will flow naturally. With Stads Canvas, one of the goals that we have with Stads Canvas is that we don't only celebrate, but that we also express, and that we teach or facilitate the integration of newcomers in Antwerp through art. One of the big questions that we had from a lot of newcomers, I want to do something in art, but I also want to do something with language. So we thought, what a better way to combine those things is by combining artistic activities with language. So instead of going to a school to learn Dutch, we invite our group, different people, depending on their interests. We invite people to go to a concert, to an exposition, to go watch something, and that will become the theme of the conversation. So in a very organic way, we practice Dutch with people, but we also introduce them to new places in the city, like a museum or a coffee bar, and place that they will never normally go there. We introduce them through art so people get to know the city and the city gets to know them. On the other side, we think it's important for artists not just to learn but also to share. So that's why that during Stads Canvas we use those cafes in Antwerp. That was the exercise, share your network. As a newcomer myself in Belgium, I got to Fameus, and that's why I think they invited me, because I can, translate the transformation from someone that was a coach that becomes a member of the team, but also somebody that knows the struggles that a lot of newcomers get to. So this reflection point is something that is very important at Fameus, that we can see, okay, you've been through this, and I understand you, and I'm not judging you, and I have more than just maybe an official way of fixing things. I can come with other ways to get to Rome, like we say in Holland. There's more ways to Rome, and you can only know those ways by putting people that work the other way in your organization. So reflection is a big part of Fameus, and the reflection of what people in Fameus do is something that we show with Stads Canvas by going to the city and showing and sharing our network. For somebody like me, I live 14 years now in Belgium, and I said to my colleagues, but wait a minute, myself, I'm a DJ and I do a lot of stuff in Antwerp. I know so many people. Why are we waiting to go to a big institution to do something? Let's just call my friend, you call your friend, you call your friend, and maybe they want to open their bar, their cafe, their shop, their whatever, to showcase new talent and people that are new in the city. Last but not least, I think, is that we question, especially the last time, the school system. We've been questioning the school system because we are very, very aware of the thresholds that newcomers bring with them. And the thresholds could be from paper or health, people running from persecution, and so on and so on and so on. But also with school system, we see that is school actually open for everybody? What are the thresholds that newcomers have when they get in, and how can we make sure that we how can you say that? Get them, bring them together. Yeah. How can we make sure that we connect the school system now? Not now. We want to change it actually, but what changes can we make in the school system, in the political system, in the art system? What are the things that we have power? How can we change it? That's something that we've been working on, not only with Fameus itself, but more organizations in Belgium, but also with the experience from newcomers that share with us in tips and tricks in how we can sometimes do things different. That's, I think, a little bit.
Yes, and maybe to add to that, because the reflection is indeed a very important element of the work of Fameus, but also of the work of Club Aroma, because you need to continuously, together with the communities or people that are visiting your organization and the people you're working with, continuously you need to reflect on how you work. And yeah, because it's a...
Can I add something? Sorry. Kan je teruggaan naar de stappenplan alsjeblieft?
Ah ja, dat gingen we nu zeggen, hè?
Nu?
Ja, dat komt.
Okay.
Voilà. Ah ja, okay. Ah yeah, but so yeah, there are also collaborations that we do, and so there was actually the Stappenplan, which is like a toolkit, actually initiated by Fameus, and we collaborate together also on thinking how to. I don't know how you would like to explain it.
Yeah, I can. Done this too many times. So this is what we call the Stappenplan, and it's actually a toolkit of how you can help your organization to be more accessible for newcomers. And there are 8 steps that we call it. Actually is a loop in how maybe you can start to working with newcomers. I'm just gonna do two very quick. The first one is what I said. What you wanna do? What you wanna do? Are you doing something because of your organization or because of the funds? Are you doing things for the people that actually need it? And the second one that I think is very important for us and is really a challenge is like how to connect your group. How do you get people at your door? At Fameus, we see that it's very important to be flexible. So we go from WhatsApp to TikTok. That we have to realize that now we can see that from Facebook is 30 and above, they said, and down there we have Instagram, and then the generation Gen Z is now on TikTok. And we try to approach them all, and we see that it's important to be flexible with your communication in what you do and how you talk with people. And always when you get at the 8th step, it says always, go back. Recalculate, see again, what have you done? Are you sure that you're doing the things for yourself, for yourself, or for the people that you're working for? How are you engaging with people? Are you being respectful with people? Are you being humane? Are you making sure that you're using the right language? And if you don't have the right language, are you using the tools like visual language or maybe tolk? A translator to help you with communication. So there are just a few tips of how you can make your organization more accessible. And we didn't do this alone. So
yes, we did it all together. And maybe something else to wrap it up that we are currently collaborating on. Ramos was speaking about the thresholds for many people who want to be connected to the education system. There is also ODC, Open Design course here from Ghent, and they actually have a program connected to CASC, which is an art school in Ghent, and Fameus is collaborating in Antwerp together with the art school St. Lucas, and Aroma don't necessarily has a structural collaboration yet with an arts institution, rather like more ad hoc, but now we are like trying to set up a collaboration between the three of us, between three different cities, to see how can we also collaborate and support each other, create like a solidarity system where we can maybe collectively go and look for funds, not necessarily governmental funds, but also other possibilities we are figuring out together, because actually it's always what Ramos says, we need to respond to the needs of a community, and these kind of needs are to have access to education system are high.
Yeah, that was it. Time?
Yes, time.
I'm
afraid so, but before you leave, this is on the website of Fameus, right? Because this is such good stuff. Website Fameus.
All for free also.
That's even better. Thank you very much. Let's hear it for Ramos and Anne. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm super glad to be here today. Thank you so much for the invitation. It feels super inspiring to be around you in this constellation, and I really can't wait to have a bit more time to talk in depth, maybe during the lunch or during the table rounds. I'm going to start today to present a bit our organization. Technical stuff.
No.
I'm going to start to present a bit our organization, just to have a background of what we are doing, and then I will present some details about Air in Residence Zusa, which is a brand new project for us, and I'm super glad to be part of it. Let's get it started. About us. Zusa was established in 2021, and it was part of the Cultural Exchange Department of Mythos. The Cultural Exchange Department has developed and implemented programs as Tandem, Culture Without Borders, and Actor of Urban Change. Now it acts independently of Mythos while still remaining a big part of their network. It is based in Berlin, but it works in Europe, North Africa, West Asia, and beyond. At the core of our work is a do-it-together approach. Together with our partners, we are creating programs by introducing tools of collaboration. What we are trying mainly to do is to help the others to get better at their work and acting as a backbone and forging more alliances. We are always trying new ways of working while remaining curious about the possibilities that our experiences and background could bring to our joint work. Zusa's story is super fluid and in continuous change as our lives and identities and events today. That's why we like to create space and be open for playfulness and experimentation. Some of our projects that we are implementing with our partners are as following. Tandem, which is a program that strengthens civil society in Europe and its neighboring regions. It creates the place to create meaningful relationships and develop different programs based on shared interest and enthusiasm for working together. Vaha. It brings the diversity of hybrid spaces and contextual responses to the crisis of democracy that the current regions are facing. And they explore the power of learning from the local practices to develop tailor-made support for platforms to express, for free expressions and cultural programming. And Around the Culture is a program that incorporates 5 different elements, and it was developed over a period of 4 years. And Culture Helps. It's a project that offers different grants for individuals or organizations that help Ukrainian displaced people to get into new communities through culture. And Erzusa, that we are going to go into the more details now. The general idea. The project was launched in 2022, and it was dedicated to artists, cultural managers, curators, art activists that come from different countries that were affected by crises. And what affected the possibility for them to continue their work. The idea was to create an opportunity for them to step back and have a place to think their next steps and literally what to do next after this kind of event. The main focus for us is to create a safe space for them where their main focus is on their well-being and improving their mental health. That's why we are inviting them for a period for at least 2 months in Berlin. And the main objectives for this is process and reflection, because it's not a product-oriented residency, so they're not going to deliver an exhibition or artwork during the residency. The main focus for them is just to relax, regain, and take the time to regain their creative energy. And resilience. The residency is tailored around their needs, but we also offer some activities as external mental support, coaching sessions, access to our local and international networking. But the artists are open to say that are not going to take anything from this, and they just want to stay there and to take a break. Where is this going to happen? The residency takes place in Lichtenberg, which is a neighborhood very calm in Berlin. All of them have access to their own bedroom and to a co-working area which is shared, and to the calm area of Lichtenberg, which also has very good connections to the city center. Please let me know if I'm talking a bit too fast. I have this tendency. The practices. We already know that the majority of the residencies are focused on the final result, but a big part of being creative means being unproductive or taking breaks from time to time. especially when external factors are affecting us emotionally. Away from repression, economical issues, post-traumatic events, they have the time to rest and to redirect their attention to what they need and to find a balance between being productive and unproductive. The practices that we are trying to implement are sleep. For most of them, it is the first time when they wake up without the sound of the alarm. So they really can enjoy being in a safe place. Also, for some of them, it's the first time when they have their own room after a long time. The financial security, which is a big element, and the connection to nature, not only in Lichtenberg, but they also have the possibility to get around Berlin, in Brandenburg. And the external mental health support, which is a huge element. We have our body and dance systems therapist who helps us with that through movement. She's Krista, which is amazing, and she has this practice of working with trauma and building resilience through body movement and different workshops. The residents are invited during the residency to take 2 days to go to Ponderosa, where they take part into different workshops and sessions, yoga, good food, and access to the facilities of the place. The lake, they can also take bike rides around. And it is very bad internet connection there, so the best place to recharge. Here are some feedback. There is only one element that we are asking, and I'm the person who asked that because I'm doing the social media too. We are trying to create like a visual journal from their experience, and because we take into account that most of them might not feel comfortable to share their identity, we just ask for something that will remind them about this experience in Berlin. So we have this archive that they send to us, like a collection of different pictures and some text sometimes. I will give you some moments to read it. And I also have a video, which is going to work a bit better on Instagram. So I'm going to present it from here. And this was a message that one of our residencies sent to my colleague, which was moving, especially after you meet them and have the time, spend some time with them and get these kind of messages could be super touching, because we know that we're offering them this space, but we don't really understand sometimes how much impact this could have. And here are our contacts. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and we are also open for collaborations. If you have any question, so please feel free to address it to me if there is still time now. Not now, at lunch or during the round tables. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Adina.
So I will present you the Atelier des Artistes en Exil, the Agency of Artists in Exile. Launched in 2017 with the support of Honda. The Agency of Artists in Exile is dedicated to identifying and providing support to over 500 artists now of all disciplines and all origin who have experiences of forced migration. So in the program you have 300 artists, but during the last year we got 200 more artists because the invasion of Ukraine and the trouble in the world. Artists in exile have to overcome specific... The Agency of Artists in Exile is a not-profit organization dedicated to identifying and, as I said, providing support to artists in exile, based on their artistic and social needs, and connect them with French and international cultural professionals. Throughout their 6 years of operation at a national scale, the agency has tested a wide array of tools and activities in the framework of social and artistic support paths with the help of medical professionals, social workers and lawyers and art professionals, individual assessment and follow-up meeting, workshop, masterclasses, production and research residency, professional fairs, etc. For instance, the agency designed a tailored language program called Learn French Through the Arts, through which artists acquire linguistic skills within the common European framework of reference for languages. This program was developed based on the observation that basic skills in France are essential to present an artistic approach to professionals and audiences. The Agency of Artists in Exile also organized cultural outreach workshops conducted by artists in exile, targeting school children and socially marginalized groups such as unaccompanied minors and newcomers. They have collaborated with NGOs that involved in welcoming of migrants. The agency aims to raise the awareness of policymakers, NGOs of social field and the general public on the topic of exile and migration. To do so, the agency organized a yearly multidisciplinary festival called Vision of Exile to showcase the work of its members. So you watch a little bit of the last edition, who was dedicated to the wars, not only the war in Ukraine, because in agency we have a lot of wars. Initially operating in the Greater Paris area, the agency has opened a branch in Marseille in 2021 and has ongoing plan to open a new branch in Lyon and plausibly in Strasbourg. Recently, the core mission of the agency evolved when organizations and endangered artists located outside of the country started contacting them to relocate artists to France, such Burma's artists, for example, after the February 2021 coup in Myanmar. The agency mobilized jointly with cultural institutions based in Marseille and in close collaboration with the Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs for the urgent relocation of 150 Afghan artists and their family members. They advised host cultural institutions across France and share their expertise of the integration process in France. In agreement with the Ministry of Culture, they have opened a hotline in Persian to guide artists and support host institutions. After Russia invaded Ukraine, they opened 2 new hotlines in Ukrainian and Russian. In the case of Russian artists and now also in the case of Iranian artists, the agency is in direct contact with the artists to help them find the procedure to follow to leave their country. Ukrainian artists are more mobile and try to move from one residency to another in Europe whenever possible. The Agency of Artists in Exile is a space of work and support, more than 1,000 square meters in center of Paris, with space for artistic practice, visual art studios, rehearsal rooms for dance and theater, music studios, writing room, video editing room, etc., where artists can come to work, a French language classroom, offices. The agency is a support, an intermediary, an interface between the artist in exile and the professional network, no community to really rely on. They are also suffering from the absence of geographic mobility and post-traumatic stress disorder related to forced migration. Based on this observation, the Agency of Artists in Exile has developed and implemented tools with the support of the French state and the municipality of Paris. However, early on the project, the organization was faced with the necessity to reach out to cultural entities based outside of France in order to find mobility opportunities for its members, complementarities with the work of other organizations, and also advocate for the support to artists in exile at a wider scale. Building on its existing connection across the continent, the agency started exchanges with European cultural organizations in October 2020 in order to prepare what would become In Exile Lab. Bilateral exchanges turned into a collective discussion and into an occasion to use a shared expertise in supporting emerging artists to reach out to artists in exile. So the Agency of Artists in Exile gathered a group of 4 main partners and 5 associated experts and finalized a proposal for the Creative Europe call for European cooperation project. In Exile Lab is a 2-year laboratory co-funded by Creative Europe and bringing together cultural organizations based in France, Italy, Sant'Ancargello Festival, Cyprus, Visual Voices, and Portugal, Alcantara Festival. Throughout the project, In Exile Lab partner will test tailored transdisciplinary paths in which artists in exile can grow as an individual and artist in their host society and the European space. They will adapt the existing tools of artistic support and use them to prototype new ways of collaborating with artists. By doing so, In Exile Lab aims at providing cultural professionals with the appropriate tools to create opportunities and make space for artists in exile. And if I have 2 minutes more, I want to show another video. Very quickly, it's our site, and you can see, for example, here, it's like databases of artists. So when the professional want to looking for some artists, you can have through the field of art, through the country, but you have other, you can be by the languages, by the location. So it's a very good tool to work. And of course you have e-gallery too if you want. Sorry, I don't use. So we try to promote to the visual art with this e-gallery, and of course our mission and press and so and so. So please, if you want to go further, you can go on the site. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I'm actually replacing a colleague from Framer Frame that was planning to do the introduction. So I'm less prepared, I think, than the others are here. But I was asked to tell something about Framer Frame, and I think I will manage to tell something about that. Because Framer Framed is almost existing 15 years. We started it as a nomadic platform, a critical platform traveling around from mainly to museums, contemporary art museums, museums for heritage and ethnography, and discussing and reflecting on exhibitions that were shown. The focus was mainly on the colonial history and of the Netherlands and how it was represented in a museological context, you could say. And after a year or so, we decided that we should also discuss actually how what kind of practices actually could be an alternative for what was happening in the museums. And we invited a lot of speakers to talk about that and to reflect on that. What kind of inclusive methods are there and how can they inspire us? And then in 2014 was the first moment that we started actually to program ourselves in our own space. It was in the north of Amsterdam. At that moment, there was not a lot of cultural institutions on the other side of the River Ij. At this moment, it's of course totally different. We cannot imagine that anymore. It's really happened in a very short time. And in the Tolhuistuin, which was like a cultural center with a lot of different functions in it, there was a space of 250 meters that we programmed and where we started with our exhibition program. And immediately, actually, we thought it would be important to facilitate also the discussions around the exhibitions and also to critically reflect on the position of the curator, the choices that were made, the story that was told in the exhibition. Actually not very long after that, 2 years after we started with our exhibition program, we also thought it would be important to think about the people from the north themselves, because we were seeing a lot of people, and there was also a young and culturally diverse community that was coming to our exhibitions, but a lot of people coming from the north were not visiting the space that easily. So then we were starting to research. In 2016 we started with that, how we could also approach them and we opened a small community space in the north of Amsterdam as well, further in the north. A small space, and in that space we worked together with the community. They more or less own the space, can program there, can organize events there, and in the same time we organize education programs. We have a residency there already for years, which is always based on a social practice together with the community. So that was also happening in the same time. And our exhibition policy in Framer Framed was that we always worked with different curators every time, another position, another story to be told. And that actually not only the process towards an exhibition was the only focus, but it was also when the exhibition opened, then also the discussion starts. And then so there was also really a focus on the exhibition period itself and how to make that an interesting research together with the audience. And in 2019 we moved to another space. We had to actually leave the space in the north. And we found a bigger space in the east of Amsterdam, where we are still. But we were very shortly opened, and in 2020 we already, of course, had to close down because of COVID. And there was also a moment that we thought we have this fantastic space. It's a beautiful place, big presentation space. And people could easily have distance here and could easily use the space, but we cannot use it. And we started a conversation with the city about it, because we were already collaborating with a community of people intercultural psychiatry, in the intercultural psychiatry, and we provided actually in conversation with the local government a space for them, and they could have their open atelier every week in Framer Framed. And we started 3 years ago, and actually during the during every close down we could still have them in our space. And the same was actually for another community. It's called We Sell Reality. That was a collaboration with Elke Uitenthuis and a community of people with and without papers and in a very fragile situation themselves. That started an atelier as well in Framer Framed. So more and more people were using actually the space in a different way. And then we've noticed actually that is also very it's very important for the organization to have these different roles, and that it's bringing us a lot more than we expected maybe in the first place. That we have a sort of a village in which we have all kind of people working together, having different aesthetics sometimes, having different conversations, having different issues, but we all have to share the space together. And that is very valuable, actually a very valuable finding that where we are now still building on and still creating more and more spaces for different people. We also have, because we have the space, and I heard all the critique on institutions, and maybe there's also some things that are right about your findings, but we have an open policy. No, people don't have to pay for entrance. Everybody's very welcome. We have free coffee and tea always, actually this is. Also, all our events are for free, and if people want to organize something in Framer Framed, it's actually something that we always try to make possible. If it's fitting our program, then we facilitate also a lot of organizations and initiatives. So that is, I will keep it short because there was a lot of talking already, but yeah, just to give you a sort of idea of what we do also a lot of international collaborations. And we had just an exhibition in the Kwangkyu Biennial. We opened the Court for Intergenerational Climate Crimes in South Korea, and did also research for that. So we had 3 law cases with local activists. So we do all kinds of things also together with different international partners. And thank you for your attention.
I would like to invite Bright and Anne and Judith to join me here for a conversation about what we just heard. And it was a lot. I hope your head is still big enough to fit it all in. Is Bright? Yeah, Bright is also here. And Anne, where are you, Anne? Welcome back to the stage. And let me pour you some water. So, I think one question has been burning in a lot of our minds is why is the cultural sector harder than, for example, the business sector? I heard you say it, Bright, but Ramos also mentioned it during your conversation. What is it that makes the cultural sector maybe harder to involve in this work that we're talking about today?
Well, I think for a couple of reasons. To start with, for example, this year now, everybody in the cultural sector, if I look at the performing arts in Holland, we are all busy with our 4 years plan, writing a 4 years plan that we're going to implement from 2025 to 2028.
Yeah.
But then you have newcomers coming in into the society. We have made our plans already. And in the plans, we don't know that people are going to come in. So generally, I think the way it is framed, people need to make plans beforehand, make budget, contact artists or things they want to do. And then you have these people coming in from outside, and then there is no space anymore, except we need to organize something else. So maybe that's one of the reasons. I think maybe, I don't know. I'm just trying to find out. I'm just trying to think what is the reason why it's not more difficult. And I also think that if I look at the performing arts that I'm also in, most theaters plan their performances months beforehand. And I always... So right now, I try to tell a lot of theaters, I don't want to be programmed. I tell the theaters, I don't want to be programmed. I want us to discuss how we can get, how we can work together to achieve a certain goal. And it's I noticed that when I'm speaking to theaters about that, it's a very new way of them to think. Because they are used to saying by December or February, all the program need to be planned for the season. And I often say I make theater for people who don't come to the theater. And people who come to the theater, my audience come to the theater because they want to connect to others. And so I noticed once I did a project with Ola Mafanani in the Stad Schouwburg. And it was during the theater festival. And I said, well, what I sometimes find very strange is the art public are very open public. But the way sometimes things are structured, we are not structured in the sense that it is a place where we come to meet others who have nothing to do with our art at all, who have other needs. So maybe, but what I notice when I work in the corporate sector now, which I do a lot, like the corporate sector, some of the companies I work with, they say, we don't only do inclusion, diversity and inclusion, because we also have a budget from the government, because every company that does a project for the government must use 5% of their budget for people who have a distance to the market. So they say if we don't use our budget, we need to pay a fine, we need to give the money back. And besides that, there's a shortage of workers. And there are a lot of skilled people coming over here. And if we use our standard recruitment system, it's not going to work. So we need to look for alternatives. And that's where you guys come in from the art sector and other things. So, and I find you know, I think first of all for me is if the art sector can recognize that the way we are practicing now doesn't work, if we want to be very inclusive, if we want to have space for people coming in and stuff like that, then we have a beginning of a conversation. Then we can think of alternative. And that's what I find easier with the corporate sector, because I have a lot of companies who come to me and say, we want to do this, but we don't know how, or our people will not be open for it. So let's try strategically. So we make a strategy together. How do we make a bottom-up approach so that the whole issue of inclusion is just not the idea of the CEO, but it's coming from the whole company. So then so I mean, you don't need to achieve everything, but there's a common ground, and that's sometimes for me the challenge. Also because I'm an outsider, trying to have this discussion. So sometimes I even make it easy for the art sector. I come with my own company, with my own money. I rent the space. I do everything just to make them see there are people right there you're not reaching to. So how can it be that this whole facility is being created from taxpayers' money, and we're not using it for
everyone?
For everyone. We're not using it for the 5% of the elite or whatever. And I said, then you always have this big distance that people think that art has in the Western world.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. I saw you nod on. Is this something that that resonates?
Yes.
It is on, I think. Okay. It's maybe not open. No, not on. Then the other one. Yeah.
This one,
Yeah, that one is.
Oops. Yes, it resonates, and next to that I have a nodding head. So I was also thinking while you were speaking, also the arts, every discipline functions differently, like music or performing arts or visual arts or audiovisual arts. I don't think we can generalize the whole arts field as one, because I think music, like the music sector, has already a tendency of working completely differently than, for instance, the performing arts. But indeed, like a lot of arts institutions plan on beforehand, and the music industry has, I think, because maybe it's an industry and functions like more like corporate. Already for a longer time works in the more hybrid than, for instance, the visual arts. I think visual arts and for also performing arts, it's very much language based. Or if it's language based performing arts, of course there is a whole complexity of how to connect how to connect with the Flemish arts field when you don't necessarily speak that language. And for instance, only Brussels maybe presents from within Flanders, and only in Brussels you can also see like non-Dutch speaking or French speaking performances. I mean, I'm thinking out loud, but just to say that you need to really look for each discipline, each example, really, because I remember that Dirk, who is sitting here from Kunstenpunt, once got a question from an opera singer, and she recently arrived from Ukraine, and her oeuvre is maybe different than the oeuvre that is used here in the opera in Brussels, let's say. Yeah, how to connect these differences of oeuvres and then also competing with so many, because it's also highly competitive. There are too many artists, I think,
and not enough money around.
I don't know about that, but I think there is enough money
for the arts.
Yeah, I mean, also if you think not only arts based, I think it's cross-sectoral and dividing and redistributing, but. I mean, it's too easy to say there is not enough money, but maybe now it's time for someone else.
You wanna add to that?
I want to add something. I think it depends too of art market. So, for example, in France now the exile is like fashionable, so we have a lot of events about exile. So there is places, but when it will finish, maybe there will be not more places. For example, the last big fair, art fair. Art Paris, it was dedicated to exile in the strange way for me, but anyway, it was written exile. And for example, the Louvre Lens in Lens just proposed us to organize an exhibition about exiles. I mean, from the beginning of the story of art. But it means when it's fashionable, it's possible to do something. Where or not, there is no place. So it's a big question. And I think there is to another topic. It's to think maybe the migrants are not professional. So migrant artists, as like a stereotype, it's not a professional artist, and you have to work on that too.
I think
because it's not. I mean, it's not academic work. It's something other. It's about again the art market.
Yeah. That's a very good point you make, and it also links back to something that Ramos said about not being in the helper seat, right? Not playing Jesus is, I think, the word that Ramos used. It also links back to research that was done by Culture Action Europe, which was quoted by Ilić in the article that she wrote following the last session. And I'm quoting the research from Culture Action Europe: in search of equal partners, looking at inclusion of artists from Southwest Asia and North Africa, they still find themselves treated as recipients of narrow and rigid integration policies or a form of solidarity that can resemble charity, which is, I think, what we all agree on. That is not what we're after. How do you deal with that in Frame of Framed? Is this a starting point or a conversation that is present as well? Like, how do you change the narrative of, what is who has that space?
I think totally that it is. We never talk about the framework of charity, but about the narrow interpretation of terms like quality. Exactly. And I think that it's for us much more important to bring that at the table and discuss what are we seeing as quality, and also how can we sort of stretch that borders and include more people in that framework, because we all know that it was a very excluding framework that was used for a very long time as being our cultural canon that was where everybody had to relate to, and I think that is the basis of the space and of collaborating and discussing where how can you make these references much more open and accessible for many more people.
I think when we, for example, talk about the refugee crisis or the housing crisis, so we all recognize as a nation that there is a crisis, that we cannot provide people accommodation or this or that. And then the whole society starts to think about what can we do, because there is a crisis and the government openly says we can do anything. And I think when the art sector starts to say openly, there are so many talents coming into the country, we can't help them, then maybe people will start to think about what can we do, so that we don't have because for me, it took me a long time to really understand that the problem is also about the public. It's not about quality, it's about the public. Because I'm in the performing arts, can the institutions, do they have a public for me? And then when I noticed, okay, I need to go to my own public, then the institutions started coming to me saying, why don't you come to us? Because they noticed that yearly I could reach 10,000 people on stage with my performance outside of them. So then they started saying, why don't you come with your performance to our place? Because I bring my public to their space. I don't need them for the public. And so I think that the more we recognize there are so many talented people coming over here, and we cannot help them. Because then maybe in the system we have created with one another, we can start thinking as funding partners, as institutions of art, because most of the money in the art, at least in Holland, I don't know about other people, goes to the building. Because when we have the building, we need to keep the building going. But it doesn't mean that the artist who is coming in, they don't know the building, they don't have access to the building, they don't benefit from the building, and therefore, and that sometimes that makes it so sometimes we need to keep the institutions running, and the people are not part of the institution. So I think when the institution openly comes out to say there are so many talents coming here, we don't know what to do, then the government at least recognizes that. And so where there is a recognition, then we start looking for a solution. That's why I said when I work with corporate world, they come up and say, we have a problem. We have vacancies, we cannot find the right people, we have money. And so before, refugees were not part of, the money that was used for corporate social responsibility that the government allocated was not meant for refugees. But it was when the companies now went to the government and say, well, they are also here, and we have this budget, why can't we use it for them as well? That is when it became a part of it.
I'm curious to hear from some people in the audience. I know, we did a show of hands. Like I know we have funds in the audience, we have organizations, we have. So I'm very curious. How does this resonate to you? Is this something that, that is also a reality in your daily work? Is this something that you try to accommodate, or that you maybe also struggle with? I'm curious to hear some reactions from you. Yeah. On my way. Yes, maybe you can briefly introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Thais. I'm an artist based in Amsterdam, and I have a project that's called The Goldfish Bleeding in a Sea of Sharks, and it's a project to mobilize artists to understand what's neoliberal mentality and neoliberal precarization, and this project also collaborated with Frame or Frame. So. And I'm also part of a network of curators and artists trying to question what is diversity and how is the term diversity being capitalized. And I pretty much identify my practice with everything that's being based and being brought. And I wanted to add the word tokenism, because what we see in the level of programming a lot in the Netherlands is that people can integrate the field in the frame of diversity if they correspond to what the programming field or what the curators basically want you to represent. And this representation is problematic because first of all was chosen by someone, the majority of people there don't belong to the things they are claiming they want to represent. And this representation was not chosen by a democratic voting system or a traditional initiation. So it also brings high competition to the communities and a lot of divergences, because suddenly we have people claiming they represent something that can be expanded. And so first of all, and if you try to step out of the diversity position that you manage to have, then you become a competitor and you cannot make any other form of art. And then what we see a lot here is that the programmers, they are capitalizing the artist for their own career purposes. I think also charity also a lot we encounter in the mindset of power, of keeping power. So it's, you can never be critical, you can never bring critical thinking, because then people also feel you are not being grateful for the help. So it's never on your rights to make your discourse. And also that a lot of institutions only have money to support themselves, so you are in a lower position of power trying to participate also as a policymaker, but with someone that has a contract or that earns 5 times more than you. and that what I see a lot here, and I think the funds are doing a work of being much more open and try to push towards certain directors, but the level of the programmers, I think there is a endemic crisis of what is the social role of being a curator. Like, how can you best contribute to the interest of the people and the land? And yeah, I think this is very prominent.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your contribution. Anybody else who would like? Yes, please.
Thank you. A lot has been said. And also what I'm hearing in the last testimony. I think one of the aspects maybe I would like to add to it is the conflict between collective mind, the mind of the group, the mind of the family, the mind of the collectivity, which can be culturally much more stronger outside Europe than in Europe, and conflict with the individuality, who is very European. And none of them I want to judge being better than the other, but they are very often in conflict with each other. And I believe working with people in exile often is inscribed in the collectivity, and organizations who are gathering people from all sorts of backgrounds. They work with the collectivity because those people would never have met each other if there wasn't this collectivity. So this conflict between the two can be quite difficult to bring together, to harmonize. And I heard it a little bit in what Judith Depaule said. It's an individual competitive context in a way, and the last testimony is also a fight between the individual need of being the artist recognized fully and the collective need of the organization trying to survive to make it possible.
Good point. Thank you very much for sharing that. Yes.
Thank you. One thing I was thinking about when Anne, or actually with like most of the presentations that we heard, is that a lot of the problems that refugee artists are facing when they come to the Netherlands are very similar to just artists in general in the Netherlands. And last year I graduated from the art school here in Amsterdam, and I'm still in touch with a lot of my peers, and I noticed that these problems that alumni are facing are very in line with these other problems. And I think that there's like three main fields that people struggle with, and those are space, and with that I mean working space, to hold up a community, and that with that I mean like a community of cultural workers or artists that they can exchange with after their studies that disappears for a lot of people, and then the opportunity to work somewhere. And what I heard from the speakers today is that they exactly go in there and try to give these opportunities. And what I just wanted to say is that I think it's interesting that there's that these problems are like a little bit the same also for the people who are already in the communities here. And I feel like there's in general like a very high competitiveness, and it's like a precarious field where there's a lot of fight about funds and about resources, and it's a difficult field to enter for anyone. And of course there's unique struggles for refugees that make it even more difficult for them. But so there's not really a question I have, but maybe one of like how we can find solidarity as cultural workers in general, and yeah.
Thank you very much. The point about precariousness and the struggles of artists was also a point that came up actually during the last Brussels meeting quite a lot. Like, I remember I was sitting at a table conversation with Hisham, the director of the Jan van Eyck Academy, who was actually making a plea for well, different funding mechanisms that would actually incorporate much more the openness that you also argued for, Bright, not the sort of fixed, boxed in 4-term plans that you have to make years ahead, and then all of a sudden there's no space for anything else but the plan. Yeah,
just one little thing is,
sure.
Because I come from a country at war,
yeah.
I have a tendency also to look at things quite differently.
Yeah.
And what I saw in a warring situation is that the rebels, the reason they can sometimes win from the government soldiers is because they know the weakness of the government soldiers. Because the government soldiers, they have all the weapons, they have all the money, but sometimes the rebels, they know their weakness and they know the fight they are fighting. The others are fighting for a salary, but the other ones are fighting for something else. And I noticed, because I studied here, and upon my graduation, I really thought, how conscious were my teachers about the war I was going to face when I left the academy, about the market that I was going to face as a migrant, as an African, as somebody coming from outside. And I think the consciousness, you know, I have kids who have other cultural backgrounds, and sometimes they also confront me with the fact that, Daddy, why didn't you prepare us for racism? And I'm shocked as well, because, okay, how do you do that? But I love that confrontation, because it is also making me conscious of the fact that they make me conscious of the fact that we have another reality. I face racism, I face things, but okay, I was not born here, but they were born here, and when they face that, then it makes me conscious of something which is in my blind spot, and which I don't want to see, because I'm conscious of it on my own side, but I would not want my kids to experience that, but it is their reality. So, and I think that when what I'm trying to say with that is that those of us who are here, we have the opportunity to empower people if we want to, if we choose to. But empowerment means, you know, I was in Budapest 2 weeks ago, and I was shocked when I heard lawyers crying, saying, hey, I took my client from Afghanistan to the police to ask for asylum, and he was taken over the border with Serbia and dumped on the other side, and saying, we cannot do anything because even European Union can help us and stuff like that. I was touched and I was angry, thinking, this is a union I want to be part of. But what I'm just trying to say is that we have the opportunity to empower people regarding the fight they are going to be confronted with. You know, if we are conscious of that and we take that into reality, then we're really helping the people, knowing that we cannot solve the problem, but we're really conscious of the problem. And it's not, and sometimes it's specific because you don't know the codes. You don't know the codes. The way of funding art for me when I came here was different from the way I was funding art when I was in Liberia. And then you don't know the codes, and when you're not made conscious, that's what I mean, the rebel and the government, because the rebel is very conscious of the fact that they will be killed. So they train in a certain way, they are prepared in a certain way, and that's what I mean with empowerment, that we could empower artists to come into our space about the fight that they will be experiencing.
I thank you for that. I actually heard quite a lot of common denominators in all of your contributions. I heard the importance of really seeing people. I also very much like the first step of the 8-step plan of Fameus, where it says really listen to what the needs are instead of making it fit into the plan. But another thing that keeps coming up is the importance of network and access and sharing and partnership. And if we start from that angle and working towards we will have lunch soon, and then after that we will have those table sessions working towards building blocks. If we start from that starting point of sharing network, what would be your contribution to that question? Like what is something that all of us, for example, here together today. We are also a network. We all have networks of our own. Like, what is something that concretely we could do to make a difference and to improve some of the issues that we heard during the day, and also in this round in the audience, some of the issues of exclusion, some of the issues of scarcity, of not sharing. What would be some thoughts on that?
Now, now, especially realizing, and I think because we started as a very small initiative and had to build it up in the past 15 years, that I remember very well how it was to be a very small initiative and how difficult it was to get things done. To open the door for initiatives is very important, but also to help people with visa proposals, to help people with funding proposals. It is all this knowledge network that you build up that you can share with others, and that we are trying to do as much as possible. So I think there's quite a lot. You have space, you have knowledge, you have network, and also this 4-year plan. I think it's also not a very strong argument in a way, because you write a 10-pager, but that is not. It's not everything can be in these 10 pages.
It's not a holy book.
No, you're working on it for 4 years. So there's, in my opinion, always some space to do things differently than what you thought a few years ago. For example, we did not know that Corona would come up. So it was also expected from us to act
to be
differently.
Flexible.
So I think, that you should also not see that as strict as it might be sometimes used by people.
Good point. Thank you. What would you reply on?
Thinking or speaking about networks, I think a lot is scattered, versnipperd in Dutch. And what I think is key is that we think much more across bubbles and sectors, like you were referring to the visa, supporting with visa procedures, supporting with language that you do in Atelier. Artistes en exile, but also in Fameus, socio-juridical, psychological, like there is so many, you were also speaking about nature, sleep, how important that is. And I think all these connections, or the film that you showed us between the more construction companies connecting, like labor market possibilities, connecting with people. Like, I think all these different fields operate often very parallelly and are often questioning the same things or looking for the same answers. And I think like making, without becoming too big, but like little hubs or little how you call it, satellites that work like more cross-sectoral. I think that's it doesn't need to be big. I think what you were presenting, zusa, is super. It's beautiful example. It's not huge, but it's small, and in itself, it presents. It offers a lot of like a whole, a whole world of support structures.
I also have to say I very much liked your network map that you did with the colors. Yeah, but we actually took pictures because it makes this particular thing very, very clear, that it's not just art, that it's not just education, that it's not just government, but it's all of that, and then preferably connected. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good example. Thank you, Judith.
I think we have to force it together, the doors of art institution. And maybe to think something about European level, because I think it's the unique way to go further. Because the toolkits, of course, it's very important, and we have the problem of the specificity of each country, about asylum, about the remuneration of the artist, because it's quite complicated. Mm-hmm. But I think we have to go in a more like big high level and to ask some reserved place for the artist in exile in each art institution.
to demand it.
Yes.
To make it
Yes.
a fact.
Yes.
Not something to hope
fashionable
for.
or maybe one case or
Thank you. Bride.
Well, I think most time, if I look at the situation in Holland, I see that there's a lot of solidarity. In 2015, in Holland, we had more people who wanted to receive the refugee, more people than the refugees that were available.
Yeah.
So there is a kind of, there's an openness. But on the second side, and that's one of the challenges I'm facing now, how do we get these people to also become the audience or the fans of the artist? Because then, and I don't know, why is this not happening? I'm still questioning myself. Because right now I'm touring with future citizens, and also it's very good. I'm working with the Dutch Refugee Council, with Vluchtelingenwerk, and I'm also working with COA and the END. So, and I noticed, we now have an audience. We have more than 36 shows only for people just connected to all these organizations. But I noticed that it doesn't speak for itself that these people are supporting the artist. And it doesn't also mean that the art organizations do not connect to these people. So right now, I'm just dealing with a kind of public who is there, but not connected to the art institutions.
Right.
And also therefore not connected to the artists. So then I think, what is going wrong? I've not still gotten the answer. There's a lot of openness from the Dutch society. There's a lot of potentials. But why are these potentials why is something not being done to have these potentials really supporting the artists? Because they are there. They are really there.
The artists are there.
The artists are there.
Support is there.
The supporters are there.
The institutions are also there.
The institutions are also there, but the bridge is not being made.
Yeah. Yeah.
And therefore, then you have the artists living in total isolation, and then,
I think that is actually maybe a very good question to take with us on our lunch break and also for the sessions in the afternoon. It's been a long and jam-packed morning full of input. So I promised lunch at 1. It's 1 sharp. So I would like to stick to my promise as a timekeeper. I first of all would like to thank our panel for sharing some of your insights and for joining us in this conversation. Thank you so much, Josien, Judith, and Bride. Give them a round of applause. Thank you. And thank you, of course, for sticking with us and also sharing and contributing in the conversation. Lunch, vegan vegetarian lunch, will be served in the patio garden for those who want it. There is shade. If you don't want to be in the sun, there is umbrellas. But you can also, of course, take your lunch and have it inside. And then we will meet back here in an hour at 2 to continue with Milica Ilić, who wrote an article that you supposedly received beforehand, which reflects back on the last session in Brussels and also gives some pointers to where we might look. And then, of course, it's time for us to sit around a table and really engage in that conversation, maybe picking up on the question that Bright just asked: how do we, in fact, build those bridges? I think that is that is the overarching topic for today. So thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch, and see you back here at 2.
Yeah, hello everybody, and thank you for being here. Also now after lunch, I have a hard task to sort of make you concentrated again on the topic at hand. I hope I do it well. So as you were mentioning, I had this experience of being at the Brussels meeting, at the Brussels Future Hospitalities meeting, and I was asked to write this text, and then we continued the conversation, and I've been asked to maybe put forward some comments that maybe emerge from that text. And so now what I'm going to try to do is put forward some ideas without necessarily repeating what is said in the text, because I guess that you can read the text if you're interested, and maybe further elaborate on some of the ideas that I might have touched upon in the text. But I also feel that I need to start in a bit of a different way, and I know that there is a great risk that I am going to preach to the choir here, but I personally find it hard or rather uncomfortable to start any kind of conversation about hospitality without acknowledging the tragedy that is somehow evolving in front of our eyes in the Mediterranean currently. And of course, I don't think I need to remind you of the numbers of what we have been witnessing in the past 10 years. But we are speaking in the most the most optimistic way, or the most understated way. We're speaking about at least 20,000 deaths in the last 10 years in the Mediterranean. And we are speaking about more than 56,000 people that are missing and most likely have died in the process of migrating into an international destination. And it feels that these deaths and this tragedy are somehow unfolding in front of our eyes without our governments being able or willing to prevent them. And somehow one cannot help but wonder, why is this not an absolute global emergency? And so I wanted to put this, again, I know that you are absolutely convinced of this, but I also wanted to put this in our conversation around hospitality, just to acknowledge that today, in our name and in our sake, laws are systematically being ignored and being broken in order to prevent people from reaching our countries and from getting away from wars and conflicts and hardship. And so somehow on a very basic level, not as art workers, but more as citizens, I really feel that we need to acknowledge that basic hospitality, where we are today, where we live today, basic hospitality is failing again and again. And somehow maybe there is also our responsibility in that, at least to consider, at least to ponder upon. And also, beside that basic recognition, it also feels that lack of empathy and that lack of solidarity somehow is systemic, and through inherited injustices and through the neoliberal policies and practices have somehow trickled down also to how we do things, to our ways of working. I'm going to try to give you an example. Until a few months ago, I was working in an organization, a Western European organization, which is a sort of a support structure that encourages, amongst other things, the distribution of performing arts on a national level, of international performing arts on a national level. Not any performing arts, but performing arts that is contemporary, that is experimental, that is risk-taking. And when the war in Ukraine intensified in the beginning of last year, we started getting a lot of calls and a lot of requests for recommendation. The question was being asked over and over again, do you know any Ukrainian artists? Can you recommend Ukrainian artists whose artistic work is challenging, is contemporary? And on the one hand, that was really encouraging, because finally we saw that there was an overwhelming solidarity, and that colleagues who are running festivals or running theatres in our national environment felt that there was an actual genuine need to support artists from Ukraine, and also to confront them and to connect them with audiences in our environment. But on the other hand, one sort of couldn't help but wonder, how come that we don't know Ukrainian artists? How come that all of these colleagues in a country that is that has an incredibly developed art scene, with with extremely sophisticated support system, how come that there is not more connection with the Ukrainian art scene? That is a scene that has a great theatrical tradition and that has a very developed and dynamic independent scene. And of course that question might sound legitimate coming from the place where I sit or where I sat in the Western European institution. But that's also, I can just see my colleagues from Eastern Europe sort of adopting a cynical grin when they hear this question. Because the reason why we don't know Ukrainian or didn't know Ukrainian artists is because somehow overwhelmingly, except a few notable exceptions, some of which are actually represented in this room today, Western European performing arts institutions have by and large ignored the artistic and organizational practices that were being experimented in Eastern Europe. And somehow that meant that there is a radical lack of knowledge of what is happening in Eastern Europe, a radical understanding of context, but also that there are a number of preconceptions, and also sometimes even behaviors that might have, that might smell of condescending or exoticizing. And I'm talking about Ukraine, and I'm talking about Eastern Europe because also that somehow Eastern Europe is also has been somehow a place or geography that I'm attached to. But the same is applicable also, as Judith was also saying this morning, is applicable to other geographies and other regions. When the war exploded in Syria and when the art scene, the Syrian art scene exploded and got scattered around the world, we saw the same questions coming in. Who are the Syrian artists? And the same question was somehow appearing at the back. How come we don't know them? And somehow that also, we can also trace back the same behavior when the wars in Yugoslavia were shaking the European societies. There was a fashion of programming Balkan artists that somehow went out of fashion conveniently. And that's related to more than just the question of hospitality. That's also related to the question of power relations at the end of the day. The mobility maps are extremely radically disbalanced, and somehow the weight is towards what is perceived or self-perceived as a center. And we that sit in this center, in this place of, and I know it's relative, so relative but still concentrated economic power, we somehow believe that we have the key to understand what is contemporary, what is artistically interesting, and I relate back to what Josien was saying about the narrow interpretation of the term quality. We think that we know what is quality, what is artistically interesting, and what is strategically smart. And we tend to take our gaze and our experience and our way of working as the norm. And so perhaps, and in my thinking there's a lot of perhaps, so I'll come back to that perhaps over and over again, but perhaps one of the crucial steps that we need to take if we are to consider, if we are to imagine future hospitalities, would be to develop the tools and the methods to decompose this certainty, to make sure that we are more open and that we are more willing to let go of this conviction that there is a center, and more importantly that we occupy it, that we sit in the middle of it. So that's one maybe idea that I want to put forward. Another one comes from this sentence, first you had to be like everyone else. And this sentence, first you had to be like everyone else, that comes from, that's the beginning of a text which was written by a French black Martinique performance artist called Rebecca Chaillon. Her text is called Indigestion. It's translated into English, and you can find it online. And in this text, she describes her career as a struggle for emancipation from the oppressive institutions and a search for a sort of a pathway towards affirming and celebrating a de-westernized, a multiple, mixed, interdependent multitude of perspectives. And as we were sitting in Brussels in this winter, that question kept on coming back to me. First, you had to be like everyone else. And I kept on thinking, while we are discussing about being more inclusive in our organizations or our practices, I wonder how can we be inclusive but without imposing? How can we make one feel welcome but without the pressure of having to be like everyone else, to use these words of Rabike Chaillot? Or to put it differently, how can the teams and the artists and the newcomers and the audiences actually benefit from each other's presence or from contacting each other? And perhaps there's something about, and another perhaps, there is something about trying less to integrate the newcomers into the structures that we have built, and trying more to launch a process which would be a sort of a symbiotic exchange, where we would be able to actually together build different, alternative, and more appropriate structures. And in that sense, this whole investigation that you mentioned also about how much the Southwest Asian, North African artists and art workers are integrated into our art field, or how much they are not, seems quite devastating. And of course it's devastating for the careers and the artistic practices of these people, these colleagues, but it's also devastating for our sector. How much we are missing from not integrating the expertise that they are bringing forward, for not benefiting from that expertise. And it's also somehow where I can also relate very much to what Bright was saying this morning about this idea, I don't want to be programmed. So I really feel that there is something to investigate about not adapting practices, but together thinking of the most appropriate practices for this moment, for this day and age. There is also something about our perspective that needs adjusting. We speak a lot about empathy and about solidarity, and for sure we have the humane responsibility to welcome into our communities the artists that have been, or art workers that have been forcibly displaced. But our motivation need not come from empathy and solidarity only. It feels like we are missing an important point here. For decades, somehow, the art sector has evolved, has transformed itself into a sort of a complex and interconnected, interdependent patchwork of relations. We have become incredibly interdependent. And although we still might be art workers, curators, producers, artists based in Amsterdam or in Brussels, we are at the same time global actors. And therefore, we share the responsibility not only of our local communities, local audiences, but also the responsibility of a global art sector. And somehow I feel that maybe it's time to accept and embrace this global perspective and acknowledge that we need to be hospitable, that we need to be good hosts, not just for the sake of welcoming those that are in need, but because this is highly beneficial and necessary for nurturing our global arts community, which would then in turn be felt by audiences back home as much as global audiences across the world. One last idea, and I really want to put it back to this emergency that I mentioned in the beginning. Also because I personally feel often, and I'm sure that you share this feeling, overwhelmed and helpless when I see this tragedy unfolding. And also, in particular, what can we do as art workers? So from a sector that is so precarious and somehow sometimes feels insignificant. But I would still like to invite us to, when we speak of hospitalities, also in the different tables in a minute, I would also like to invite us to consider what we can do so that our sector, our cities, our countries become a place of refuge and hospitality for those that are in need, and not just those that manage to jump over the wall of the fortress. And perhaps, again, a first step is to mobilize and to connect, and certainly to connect across sectors. And I think that opportunities like this also allow for that to happen, for conversations to happen across sectors. And we need more of those, and we need them more diverse, and we need more diverse actors to come into the conversation. One final recommendation, and it's a short one. In the past years, I've been very much inspired by the work of a group of researchers in a project called Pirate Care. It's a project that is carried by Marcel Mars, Tomislav Medak, and Valeria Graziano, Croatian and Italian researchers based in the UK. Pirate Care is a sort of a reflection platform, but it's also a network of scholars and practitioners and activists who advocate for the decriminalization of solidarity and building a common care infrastructure. And they have also developed an online syllabus that is free and accessible, and I really encourage you to dive into it. Why I mention Pirate Care here is that I really feel that there is something to build on their argumentation. They argue that our system of inherited injustices and neoliberal decomposition of structures of care puts us in a situation of us in the art sector of a responsibility, and somehow there is no greater responsibility for us than to imagine and to connect and to reinforce the small grassroots initiatives that propose micro solutions to this overwhelmingly present injustices. And perhaps that's the one powerful tool that we have, that we can imagine a multitude of micro corrections that hack our flawed system, that proposes acts of resistance as a way to maybe contribute to a society that can really be hospitable at its core. And an optimistic, maybe too optimistic way to end. But let's see what we can do at the roundtables.
Thank you so much, Milica.